Well, greetings and welcome to the channel. Today I'm at St Mary's in Long Sutton, Lincolnshire, whose spire is said to be the oldest lead spire in the country. As we'll see later in the video, the tower is built detached from the church, resting on a set of open arches which may have been used for a market. The current stone church replaced a wooden church that was built in 1120. In 1170, the present church was built in the Norman transitional style on an area of higher raised silt, presumably to establish more secure foundations and drainage. This would appear to have been a wise choice because the present church has certainly stood the test of time, and also the foundations with a considerable weight of Barnack limestone. In the south porch, if you look carefully at the first stone boss, you'll be able to make out a portrayal of a phoenix pecking at its own heart. This is thought to be an early symbol of the resurrection. I've rushed past it, but the second boss nearest the entrance to the nave shows two masks, thought to be a reference to the fact that mummers or folk plays were performed here by medieval guilds. In the porch there are also steps leading up to what is known as the Parvulae's room. This dates back to the 14th century and was originally used as a monastic scriptorium. This is a rather splendid Norman nave with 8 bays. The roof was raised in the 19th century, adding another clerestory and thereby more light into the nave. As we move east towards the chancel, the viewer may see a doorway to the rood screen behind the pulpit. The chancel has a hammer beam roof along with flying angels. The reredo at the high altar is Victorian, a fine representation of the Last Supper dating from when the sanctuary was reordered. The stained glass window is 5-panelled and Victorian. All the other stained glass windows represent scenes from the Old and New Testaments. As I attempt to do a pirouette with my camera, you may think you're hearing my tummy rumbling, but it's a motorbike. I'm not sure whether it's medieval or Victorian. If you know, let me know in the comments section below. Interestingly, there's a plaque to the Allenby family, which relates to General Allenby of the Middle East, who entered Jerusalem in 1918 at the start of the British occupation of the Holy Land. The reason I mention it is because I've had a long interest in T.E. Lawrence, known as Lawrence of Arabia, and he rode a motorbike, though he died in 1935, so it wasn't his tummy rumbling either. If I was diligent enough to take photo of the Allenby plaque, it will be in the photographs at the end of the video. Does anyone get that far into my videos? Let me know below. That little story has taken me away from the church. This is another Victorian stained glass window. This is a sedilia, which is basically a group of stone seats for the clergy, usually in the south chancel wall of a church, and there's usually 3 in number and often canopied and decorated, such as these winged angels with shields. In the light whilst I was filming, I hadn't realised there were wooden figures in the position of corbels, but more decoration than support, I imagine. For a close-up, see the pictures at the end of this video. Though the earlier medieval appointments are long gone, including the pulpit and wall paintings, whose vestiges are hard to make out, the present pulpit is nevertheless wonderful and dedicated to the churchwardens John Swain and John Peel. As Simon Jenkins, the writer of England's 1,000 Best Churches, writes, the church interior is Norman and big enough not to have required rebuilding as the population grew in size and wealth. We now make our way towards the Lady Chapel, which was restored after World War II, where the Laudian altar is still used. A Laudian is a decorative piece of cloth that hangs over the altar frontal cloth on some Christian altars. A Lady Chapel is attached to a church and dedicated to the Blessed Virgin. The Lady Chapel was frequently made larger than other chapels in the church, However, no standard usage in building lady chapels ever developed. Usually they are enclosed, but this one is very open, as you'll gather when we turn around. As you can see, we're not enclosed. As you can see, the place radiates light, the radiator radiates heat. Well, maybe not at this time of the year. The costs would be far too prohibitive for that. In the Domesday Book of 1086, Long Sutton is referred to as Sudtone and is described as being King's Land, that is, belonging directly to the king. I would have put that earlier in the narration, but it encroached on my description of the stone bosses in the south porch. Just as I'm encroaching upon the visuals of that wood, there's a picture at the end which explains it. This video editing lark can be a bit tricky at times. I'm doing my best. It is what the Japanese would term my wabi-sabi moment, the perfect imperfect, or as I may state, in a poetic moment, faults hang out like laundry to dry the tears of my soul. Here we get a better view of the Victorian pulpit that I mentioned earlier, before swinging almost violently round to see the north side of the church. Attempting to steer the camera for your visual delight whilst avoiding tripping over the artefacts is always a bit of a challenge. The octagonal font at the west end of the north aisle is raised upon two stairs. I understand the font is 12th century. Whilst editing this part of the video, I'm reminded that it is here that I met Jeff Palmer from the Parochial Church Council, who assisted me in arranging my visit to this area. Indeed, it is people like Jeff who are essential in keeping places like this open, so people like myself can experience and discover the delights within them. Thanks, Jeff. Now, talking of Jeff reminds me that he told me to look out for a small glass window which is said to be St. George. There is possibly a dragon under his foot, so not all the glass is Victorian. It is by the Lady Chapel and is medieval painted glass before stained glass was used. There is a picture in the photos at the end. This stained glass window looks delightful in the late afternoon light. Can you spot my deliberate mistake? Here is a headstone for an early 19th century plumber and lead worker called Joseph Tonnard. This person left his footprint on the south aisle lead roof during repairs in 1828, which may have been a way of signing his work. Did you get it? Both plumbers are actually within the church. I'm just not sure where to locate the one I described. Probably another wabi-sabi moment. Apparently the financing of later work here has been attributed to John of Gaunt from the 13th century. He was an occasional resident at neighbouring Bolingbroke Castle, which is in my previous video. Well, we're now making our way outside to view the exterior. At least I think the exterior's on the outside. I shall imagine the wedding march and declare myself man and wife. May I live happily together. Enough of this silliness. I forgot to say it earlier, but upon entering the nave, there is a memorial to a gravedigger and sexton on the wall immediately behind. Hopefully I got a photo. I don't know yet. Apparently the highwayman Dick Turpin lived at Long Sutton for a while sometime during the last years of his life. Turpin was hanged at York in 1739. On the outside above the bow tower door there is a mass dial clock. The first clock dates back to 1547, which was improved in 1765 to be renewed in 1889 and 1912. The golden cockerel atop the weather vane reputedly dates from medieval times and was restored in 2004. The spire has 4 spirelets at its corners. The cross here on the east side of the church relates to George Spencer Lee Bennett and his wife. George was vicar of Long Sutton between 1887 and 1906. There's quite a few Georgian tombstones here. The oldest graves of this church lay in the Lady Chapel, which are marked by brasses, and some lie under the nave carpet. Sure all the churches upon the earth he bore with tottering feet, Rouen, Amiens, Bourges and Chartres, Long Sutton and Gedney Fleet. So sweet, so terrible the load, it was as though he carried God. That's a poem by Richard Lawson Gales. And here we approach the North Gate entrance. I don't know whether it is ever used nowadays. Doesn't look like it. Here we can see how the tower is separate from the actual church. According to Simon Jenkins, this tower was built detached from the church, resting upon a set of open arches which may have been used for a market. These were filled in for stability during the 18th century. The upper stages have blind arcading. The spire rises directly and without any parapet in the early Gothic fashion. The transformation of the square tower into octagonal lead spire with 4 balancing turrets gives Long Sutton its charm. As previously stated, the spire is said to be the oldest lead spire in the country. Well, we'll just scroll up the other side of the tower and then we shall leave. There's some nice pictures after this video, so do linger a while longer. So thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.